Kate adjusted the lace set on the mannequin and took a step back, scrutinizing the window display of her shop, Intimate Secrets. In the 5 years since it opened, the small boutique had earned a reputation as a place to find truly high-quality lingerie, rather than mass-produced sets from shopping malls. Customers appreciated the attentive service and the fact that Kate always helped them find lingerie that was perfectly suited to their size and style. It was a quiet morning. The first customer wasn't due to arrive for another hour. Kate loved these peaceful moments alone with her shop. She leisurely checked the layout of the merchandise, adjusted the price tags, and sat down at the counter to look over the orders for the following week. The phone rang softly, a message from Donald. "I'll be late tonight. Don't wait up for dinner." Kate frowned, the third time that week. Her husband had always warned her in advance when he was going to be late, but now these last-minute messages were becoming more frequent. She twirled her wedding ring on her finger, an old habit she had when something was bothering her. 12 years of marriage had taught her to sense any changes in her husband's behavior. Lately, something had changed imperceptibly. Donald had become distracted, often checking his phone, and recently she had noticed that he had set a password, for the first time ever. Kate remembered how he had always made fun of people who were paranoid and locked their phones. "I have nothing to hide," he used to say. And now, the doorbell rang, the first customer had arrived, and Kate put her worrying thoughts aside. Work always helped her take her mind off things. The day passed as usual: consultations, fittings, conversations with regular customers. One of them, Martha, lingered to chat after her purchase. "How's Donald? Haven't seen him in a while," she asked. "He's working a lot." Kate smiled her usual smile. "Yes, it's a busy time for financiers right now. Mine is always at the office too," Martha nodded understandingly. In the evening, as she was closing the store, Kate remembered this conversation. Was it really such a busy time for financial advisors right now? She took out her phone and looked at the time. It was just after 9. Donald usually came home around 7. She used to wait for him with dinner, but lately she had been eating alone more and more often. Kate walked slowly to her car, parked around the corner. It was a damp autumn evening with a light drizzle. She loved Donald so much that it sometimes scared her. From the moment they first met, when he walked into the bookstore where she worked, Kate knew it was fate. His self-confidence, his slightly mocking gaze, his ability to tell stories that made everyone around him freeze. She fell in love instantly and forever. At home, Kate mechanically reheated her dinner and sat down at the table. In the empty kitchen, the sound of her fork against her plate seemed particularly loud. The phone was silent. No calls, no messages. In the past, if Donald was late, he would always text or call just to ask how her day was going. Now those little signs of attention had disappeared. She remembered how Donald once said to her, "You love me too much." It didn't sound like a compliment, more like a statement of fact. At the time, she had just laughed. Yes, he loved her. So what? Could there ever be too much love? Kate cleared the dishes and went into the bedroom. On the bedside table was their wedding photo. They both looked so happy, so young. She ran her finger across the glass, wiping a speck of dust from her husband's face. Lately, he had almost stopped smiling that special smile he reserved only for her. Rain was falling outside. Kate lay down in bed with a book, but the words blurred before her eyes. Maybe she was imagining things, making a mountain out of a molehill? Donald just worked a lot and was tired. He couldn't— No, not him. He wasn't like that. At the beginning of the first chapter, the front door clicked. Kate had almost fallen asleep, but she immediately opened her eyes. Donald quietly went into the bathroom without even looking at her. He always used to come in to kiss her, even if he thought she was asleep. 15 minutes later, he lay down next to her, turning his back to her. He smelled of an unfamiliar perfume, a light, almost imperceptible scent, a woman's perfume. "Is everything okay?" Kate asked into the darkness. "Yes, I'm just tired. Go to sleep," he replied without turning around. Kate lay awake until dawn, listening to her husband's steady breathing and trying to convince herself that there was a logical explanation for everything. But somewhere deep inside, a terrible certainty was growing. Something irreparable had changed in their lives, and she didn't yet know what it was. The morning began with Donald's usual, "I'll be late again today." Kate sent a smiley face in reply and put her phone away, trying to suppress her growing anxiety. Over the past month, she had begun to notice how often this scenario repeated itself. A short message in the morning, a long, empty evening, and a late arrival home. The store was unusually busy for a Tuesday. The new collection of French lingerie had attracted many regular customers. Kate immersed herself in her work, helping customers choose and try on items. One of the shoppers, while selecting a set, shared a story about how her husband had suddenly started buying her expensive lingerie. It turned out he was trying to make up for something. Kate smiled awkwardly and changed the subject. After lunch, she accidentally dropped a folder with documents, and as she bent down to pick up the scattered papers, she noticed that her wedding ring was unusually loose on her finger. Strange. It used to fit tightly. She must have lost weight from the constant stress of the last few weeks. The thought that she was losing not only weight but also her husband made her hands tremble. In the evening, Kate decided to stop by the supermarket. The refrigerator was completely empty. In the produce section, she ran into Martha, who exclaimed in surprise, "I thought you were at that presentation with Donald today. He told Paul he was taking his wife to some important event." Kate felt the blood drain from her face. It was the first time her husband had lied so blatantly. Usually he just got away with vague references to work and meetings. At home, she was mechanically unpacking her groceries when Donald's phone vibrated in his jacket pocket, which had been carelessly thrown over the back of a chair. Kate froze with a bag of frozen vegetables in her hands. The phone continued to vibrate. She slowly approached the jacket. The screen lit up with "Incoming from Sarah from the office." Strange. Donald had never listed his colleagues like that before, by their place of work. Her finger slid across the screen, answering the call. "Don, you forgot your folder with the documents," a woman's voice said, and something in her tone made Kate's blood run cold. It was too soft, too intimate for a work call. "This isn't Donald, it's his wife," she replied in an even voice. There was a pause on the other end, then a hurried, "Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to tell you about the work documents." "Yes, of course. I'll pass them on," Kate pressed off. She stood in the middle of the kitchen, clutching her husband's phone in her hand, trying to resist the urge to open his messages. Password. She had never checked his phone before. She trusted him completely. But now... Kate put the phone back in her jacket pocket and sat down at the table, wrapping her arms around her head. She remembered a recent conversation when she asked him why he had set a password. "Oh, just new security rules at work," he had said casually. A lie. Kate knew for sure that there were no such rules at his company. Her friend worked there, in a different department. The next few days were torture. Kate watched Donald get ready for work, a little more carefully than usual, choosing his tie, standing in front of the mirror a little longer. She noticed a new habit, putting his phone face down. She saw him sneak a peek at his messages, thinking she wasn't looking. On Friday evening, she couldn't take it anymore. Donald was about to stay late at work again when Kate asked, "Who is Sarah from the office?" He froze for a moment, then shrugged. "She's a new employee in our department. Why?" "She called you the other day." Kate watched his reaction closely. A slight shadow of concern flashed across his face, but he quickly regained his composure. "Oh, yes, there were some documents. Listen, I'm late for a meeting." "Dawn," Kate said quietly. "What's going on? You've changed. We've changed." He shrugged irritably. "Nothing's going on. Just a lot of work." "Really? And that's why you lied about the presentation this week?" Now he was clearly nervous. "How did you— Listen, let's talk later, okay? I really have to go." Kate watched him hurriedly put on his coat, avoiding her gaze. "I love you," she called after him. He nodded without turning around and left. He didn't even respond, for the first time in all their years of marriage. After he left, Kate stood at the window for a long time, staring at the empty street. Then she slowly walked around the apartment, touching familiar things, their shared things, photos on the walls, souvenirs from trips, books on the shelves. 12 years of life together were laid out on shelves, hung on walls, scattered around the apartment in small details. She remembered the story of everything, every moment. In the bathroom, Kate mechanically picked up a comb and froze when she noticed a long strand of light hair. Her hair was brown. She slowly wound the strand around her finger, examining it in the bright light of the lamp. Such a small detail and so devastatingly obvious. At night, lying awake, she remembered how she had met Donald. His first courtship, his proposal, their wedding. How he said that her love made him a better man. How she had always felt this strange divide, that she loved him much more than he loved her. But wasn't that normal? Was it possible for two people to love each other exactly the same way? Now, looking back, she saw the first warning signs, how he gradually distanced himself, how he talked less and less about his feelings, how his touches became more and more mechanical. But she didn't want to notice these signs, convincing herself that it was natural. When the first passion subsides, relationships become calmer. At 3 in the morning, the front door opened quietly. Kate lay motionless, listening to the familiar sounds. He was taking off his shoes, going to the bathroom, turning on the water. The scent of unfamiliar perfume was too strong to be dismissed as a coincidence. When Donald lay down next to her, she couldn't take it anymore. "Are you seeing someone else?" There was silence for a few seconds. Then he sighed. "Kate, let's not— I need to know." "No, it's nothing. Really." His voice sounded tired and irritated. She turned to him. "Then why have you changed so much? Why are you lying to me? Why do you smell like women's perfume?" "God, Kate," he sat up abruptly. "You're paranoid. Yes, I work a lot. Yes, there are women at my office. I can't control whose perfume I walk into in the elevator or the conference room." She stared at his back in the darkness and knew that this was the beginning of the end. The feeling was like a slow fall. You're still intact, you can still breathe, but you know that the impact with the ground is inevitable. All that remains is to wonder how painful the landing will be. "I just want everything to be like it was before," she said quietly. Donald lay back down, turning his back to her. "Everything's fine. Just a difficult period at work. Let's go to sleep." Kate stared into the darkness with her eyes wide open. There were only a few inches between them, and a whole chasm of unspoken words. She could reach out and touch his shoulder, but she knew he would flinch at her touch. Once, a long time ago, he had reached out to her himself. Now she wondered if there had been a moment when it all started to go wrong. And if there had been, why had she missed it? On a rainy October morning, Donald asked to borrow her car. His was in the shop. Kate agreed without hesitation, especially since she usually walked to the store, only a leisurely 10 minutes away. Besides, lately, any opportunity to do something for her husband seemed precious, as if every little thing could bring their relationship back on track. It was a busy day. A new shipment of lingerie had arrived just in time for the sale of last year's collection, so Kate was barely able to keep up with the customers. Towards evening, when the rush had subsided, she finally sat down to rest and checked her phone. A message from Donald. "Left your car keys with the concierge. Didn't even bother to bring them home. After picking up the keys, Kate got into her car and turned on the heater. It was chilly outside. She reached for the dash cam to check how much space was left on the memory card. The recording icon was flashing on the display. She mechanically pressed the play button and heard Donald's voice. She was about to turn it off, but the next sentence made her freeze. "Yes, I remember Kate's dinner. No, honey, I'll find an excuse not to go." A woman's voice, slightly distorted by interference. "She's always having dinners and meetings, as if that could fix anything." Donald's laughter, so familiar and yet so foreign. "You know, she's always been a little pushy. She tries too hard." "Poor thing. When are you finally going to make up your mind?" "Tracy, we've talked about this. It's complicated." "What's complicated? You said yourself you don't love her anymore." A pause. Then Donald's quiet reply, "Yes, I don't. I haven't for a long time." Kate sat clutching the steering wheel, listening to her husband discuss their marriage with his mistress. Every word hit her like a blow. They spoke about her condescendingly, with slight contempt. Poor Kate, who couldn't see what was obvious, who was clinging to the relationship, who was trying too hard. The conversation continued. Something about the Violet Hills boutique where Tracy worked, about some deliveries and documents. Kate wasn't listening anymore. One thought was racing through her mind. "I don't love him, not for a long time." How long was that? A year? 2? Forever? The recording cut off mid-sentence. Kate pressed the button again and listened again. And again. She memorized every intonation, every nuance of their conversation. How Donald called her sweet. He used to only call Kate that. How this woman spoke with a possessive tone in her voice. How they both seemed to be sharing a private joke that only they understood. Kate returned home after midnight, driving around the city, unable to bring herself to enter the apartment and pretend that nothing had changed. Donald was already asleep. His jacket was hanging on a chair, and his phone was sticking out of the pocket. Kate took it out and stared at the screen again, waiting for the password prompt. Now she knew what was there. Messages from Tracy, their photos, plans for the future. A future without her. In the morning she woke up with only one thought in her mind, to find out who Tracy was. The Violet Hills boutique was easy to find, an expensive designer clothing store in the city center. The website had a photo of the manager, a striking blonde with a professional smile, Tracy Hill. Kate stared at the photo, trying to understand what Donald had seen in this woman. Flawless makeup, expensive hairstyle, fashionable suit. The complete opposite of Kate herself, with her simple brown hair and minimal makeup. Perhaps it wasn't even about her appearance. Tracy was simply different. New. Not the person who knew Donald inside out, who remembered his failures and weaknesses, who loved him too much. At the store, Kate worked on autopilot. She smiled at customers, gave advice on lingerie, answered calls from suppliers. Inside, she felt deafeningly empty. She didn't even cry. She just felt everything that had given her life meaning for the past 12 years crumbling away. That evening, as she was sorting through a new shipment of lace sets, Kate suddenly realized that she was to blame. She had loved too much, cared too much, tried too hard. What was it Donald had said? Obsessive. She really had always wanted to be the perfect wife, cooking his favorite meals, remembering all the important dates, taking an interest in his work. Maybe that was what had pushed him away. Maybe men needed something else, not care and devotion, but lightness and novelty. The next day, Kate caught a taxi and drove to Violet Hills. She didn't know why. She just wanted to see the woman who had ruined her life. Parking across from the boutique, she watched Tracy interact with customers, move gracefully between the clothes racks, and carry herself with confidence. At one point, Donald entered the boutique. Kate watched Tracy's face change when he appeared, how they exchanged a supposedly businesslike handshake, how he leaned toward her a little closer than propriety demanded. It was a strange feeling to see her husband with another woman, not catching them in a compromising situation, not catching them red-handed, just watching their seemingly innocent interaction and understanding how much was hidden behind this veneer of propriety. At home, Kate opened her closet and critically examined her wardrobe for the first time in a long time. Comfortable jeans, simple blouses, a couple of business suits for important meetings with suppliers. Nothing like Tracy's sophisticated outfits. Donald had once said that he liked her simplicity and naturalness. Apparently, that was a lie too. Kate took the note from the dashcam, which she had wisely saved on her phone. Now she had proof of his infidelity. But what should she do with it? Make a scene? Demand a divorce? Or lie low and come up with a plan for revenge? All of these options seemed both right and completely pointless at the same time. On the wall of their bedroom hung their first photo together, 12 years ago, at an amusement park. They were both laughing. Donald had his arm around her shoulders and the look in his eyes. Kate remembered that look. Back then, it was genuine love. When had everything changed? At what point had she stopped being the woman he loved and become a burden? At night, lying awake, Kate replayed the conversation she had overheard in her head. "My poor thing," Tracy had called him, as if he were the victim, an unhappy man trapped by an unloving wife. But he himself had once said that her love made him a better man, that he felt special when he was with her. Now those same words were probably coming from Tracy. The emptiness was worse than the pain. Kate went to work, smiled at customers, sorted through lace sets and silk peignoirs, but it all seemed endlessly distant, as if she were looking at her life through thick glass. The boutique, which had once been her pride and joy, now resembled a beautiful stage set. Behind the perfectly arranged lingerie and carefully designed window displays, there was no longer any soul. What exhausted her most was the need to pretend that nothing had happened. Every morning, Kate made Donald his coffee as usual, 2 spoons of sugar, a little milk. She asked him about his plans for the day. She listened to his answers, knowing that every word was a lie. He left for work and she watched him go, wondering if he was going straight to Tracy's or stopping by the office first. In her purse was her phone with a recording of their conversation. Sometimes, locking herself in the dressing room under the pretext of checking the lighting, Kate played it over and over again. She had memorized every intonation, every pause. "I don't love you. I haven't for a long time." 4 words that ended 12 years of marriage. Life had turned into a strange spectacle. Donald calls to say he'll be late. Important meeting with a client. Kate replies softly, "Okay, dear," and imagines him at the Violet Hills boutique. He comes home late at night. Traffic was terrible. She nods and notices a lipstick stain on his shirt collar that he didn't have time to wipe off. They sit down to dinner and he talks about work. Now Kate hears the falsehood in every word he says. One morning she caught herself checking his pockets while he was in the shower. She felt disgusted with herself. She never thought she could stoop so low. But the emptiness inside her needed to be filled with any facts, any evidence, as if gathering enough clues would help her understand why everything had gone wrong. A long-time customer, Mrs. Parker, came into the store to pick out lingerie for her wedding anniversary. They chatted for almost an hour about marriage, about how important it was to keep the spark alive in a relationship. Kate nodded and smiled, holding a lace peignoir in her hands. "I wonder if Tracy wears these? Or does she prefer something more revealing? And does Donald compare them when—" She stopped herself. The worst moments were like this, when her imagination painted pictures of their encounters, how they laughed at her naivety, how they discussed the future, how they touched each other. Kate bit her lip until it hurt. No, she mustn't think about that. In the evenings, she would stand in front of the mirror for a long time, staring at her reflection. chestnut hair, brown eyes, a simple face without makeup. Donald once said that she was like a forest stream, just as pure and natural. What a silly comparison. Tracy was like expensive champagne, sparkling, bright, festive. No wonder he chose her. On the weekend, they went to the supermarket as usual. It was their tradition. Saturday shopping, then coffee at their favorite pastry shop. Kate rolled the cart between the aisles while Donald loaded it with groceries. Everything was the same as always. Only now she knew that these were the last echoes of their former life. I wonder if he really thinks he can live a double life forever, or is he just waiting for the right moment to end it all? In the evening, sorting through the groceries, Kate suddenly froze with a bag of pasta in her hands. They had bought enough food for a week. So deep down, she still believed they had a future, that she could just go on living, pretending that nothing was happening. The following week, she began to notice how often Donald checked his phone. It hadn't been noticeable before, but now his every move was under her scrutiny. There he was, reading a message, the corners of his mouth turning up slightly. He's typing a reply on the sly while she thinks he's watching TV. He frowns at the screen. Probably Tracy isn't happy about something. Kate has learned to read his lies by the smallest signs. When he was telling the truth, he looked her straight in the eye. When he lied, he looked away slightly and blinked frequently. When he was getting ready to go to Tracy's, he stood in front of the mirror a little longer than usual. When he came back from her place, he went straight to the shower even if it wasn't hot outside. On Thursday, she couldn't take it anymore and drove to Violet Hills. She parked across the street and watched the entrance to the boutique. Tracy fluttered out at lunchtime wearing an impeccable suit, high heels, and walking with confidence. She got into a silver Lexus and drove away. 10 minutes later, Donald pulled up. Kate watched him enter the boutique and felt like the heroine of a cheap detective novel, but she couldn't stop herself. That evening, she opened her laptop and began searching for information about Violet Hills. It was a fashionable store known for its exclusive collections. Tracy Hill had been the manager for the last 3 years. Before that, she had worked at another boutique in the same chain. An impeccable career, a brilliant reputation. Kate methodically gathered information, not knowing why. Perhaps she was trying to understand what it was about this woman that had proved stronger than 12 years of living together. At night, when Donald was asleep, Kate lay next to him and listened to his breathing. The sound used to calm her, but now every breath was painful. She looked at his face, so familiar and yet so foreign. For 12 years, she had fallen asleep and woken up next to this man. She knew every line on his face, every habit, every thought. It turned out she knew nothing. On Friday, a woman who looked like Tracy came into the store, the same striking blonde. Kate felt nausea rising in her throat. She had to ask a new saleswoman to serve the customer. All day long, she couldn't shake the feeling that what was happening was unreal. It was as if she were watching a movie about her life, where everything seemed the same, but every scene was steeped in falsehood. On Saturday morning, watching Donald get ready for his business meeting, Kate suddenly realized that this couldn't go on. She wouldn't throw a tantrum, beg him to stay, or try to hold him back. But she wouldn't silently endure this lie either. Something had to happen. Something had to change. She sat at home all day, thinking about her options. She could file for divorce. She could tell everyone about their affair. She played the recording from the voice recorder again. "My poor darling." Tracy's voice dripped with superiority. And suddenly Kate realized that was it. Not hysterics, not a scandal, not divorce. Something else. Something that would make this confident woman feel as devastated as Kate felt right now. Olivia's had always been considered one of the best restaurants in town. Kate remembered their first dinner here. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Donald had reserved a table by the window overlooking the waterfront. Now, She was sitting at the same table across from her husband, trying not to think about the fact that he might have brought Tracy here too. Donald's invitation to dinner had come as a surprise. He had been avoiding any kind of outing together lately. Kate agreed, deciding it was a good sign. Maybe he had changed his mind. Maybe things could still be salvaged. She wore a dark blue dress that he had once liked and even had her hair done for the first time in a long time. The waiter brought the menu and they immersed themselves in studying the wine list. Donald seemed unusually nervous, constantly adjusting his tie and avoiding her gaze. Kate watched him over the menu, trying to guess what was behind this sudden invitation. Was he going to confess? Had he decided to give their marriage another chance? "How's the store?" he asked when the appetizers were served. Kate started talking about the new collection and plans to expand the product line. Donald nodded, but she could see he wasn't listening. His gaze kept wandering everywhere but her, as if he felt uncomfortable. Tracy appeared just as they were starting on the main course. Her arrival was no accident. She made a beeline for their table, beaming her trademark smile. She was wearing a form-fitting red dress and shoes with sky-high heels. Donald flinched with tension. "What a surprise!" Tracy's voice rang like crystal. "Would you mind if I joined you? I just saw you through the window and thought I'd say hello." Without waiting for an answer, she gracefully sat down in the empty chair. Kate looked at her husband. He clearly didn't know where to look, so it hadn't been planned on his part. Tracy had acted on her own initiative. "I'm Tracy Hill, manager of the Violet Hills Boutique. Donald and I work together," she said, extending her hand for a handshake. Kate mechanically responded, noting her perfect manicure and the subtle scent of expensive perfume. The same perfume Donald sometimes wore when he came home late at night. "Donald has told me so much about you," Tracy continued, beckoning to the waiter. "And about your wonderful lingerie shop. What's it called? Intimate Secrets. Such a lovely name." There was a hint of mockery in her voice. Kate felt her face flush. Donald sat staring at his plate as if it held the answers to all the questions in the universe. "Yes, thank you," Kate tried to say evenly. "We specialize in high-quality lingerie. Not everyone can afford designer outfits, but every woman should have good lingerie." Tracy smiled. "Oh yes, I completely agree. Although, some people say that a woman who is satisfied with affordable lingerie is probably satisfied with affordable everything else." There was a heavy pause. Donald finally looked up. "Tracy? What?" She batted her eyelashes innocently. "I'm just making conversation. By the way, Donald, you haven't forgotten about tomorrow's meeting, have you? We need to discuss that delivery." Kate watched them exchange glances across the table. There was clearly some kind of silent dialogue going on between them, understandable only to the two of them. Nausea rose in her throat. "How long have you been working together?" she asked, surprised at the calmness of her own voice. "Oh, a few months." Tracy took a sip of Donald's wine. Sometimes you meet someone and you just know, this is it. Right, honey?" The last word hung in the air like a slap. Donald flinched. "Tracy, please." "Please what?" She no longer hid her contempt. "You think your wife can't see what's obvious? She's not blind. Although, judging by how long you've been leading her on." Kate slowly rose from the table. Her legs were shaking, but she forced herself to stand straight. "Donald, are you going to let her talk to me like that?" He remained silent, looking away. Tracy also stood up, swaying on her heels. What is he supposed to say? That he loves you? That all these months he hasn't dreamed of getting rid of you? "Shut up," Kate said quietly. "Why? Because the truth hurts? Do you know what he calls you? Housewife. Nag. Woman who smothers with love. Do you think he needs your pathological devotion? Your pathetic attempts to keep him?" "Don't you find it strange," Kate said quietly, that a woman who stole someone else's husband is talking about pity. The most pitiful sight is when a mistress tries to prove that she is better than the wife, especially in a restaurant, especially in front of her husband. Tracy's hand shot up unexpectedly, and a resounding slap burned Kate's cheek. A dead silence fell over the restaurant. A fork clattered somewhere. Someone gasped. Donald finally jumped up. "What are you doing?" Kate stood with her hand pressed against her burning cheek. Tracy looked at her with a triumphant smile. "What? You can't even answer? Typical beaten wife who—" "I don't need to answer," Kate said calmly. Too calmly. Inside, she was frozen, but her voice sounded steady. "I just want you to remember this moment that you consider your triumph. Remember it well." She turned to her husband. "And you didn't even stand up for me. You know, I always thought I loved you too much. Now I realize it was you who loved yourself too much. For both of us." Kate grabbed her purse and headed for the exit. She heard Tracy laughing behind her and Donald saying something, but she wasn't listening anymore. In her purse was her phone with a recording of their conversation in the car, and now she knew exactly what to do. It was drizzling outside. Kate walked along the embankment, the raindrops mixing with the tears on her face. Her cheek still burned from the slap, but inside she felt surprisingly clear-headed. 12 years of marriage had not ended when she found out about the affair. Not when she heard the recording. It had ended today, when she saw her husband silently watching her humiliation. She took out her phone and found information online about the owner of the Violet Hills boutique chain. Now, everything fell into place. The regular business meetings, the conversations about deliveries, and some documents. Kate dialed the number. The ringing cut through the evening silence. The cold autumn wind pierced her to the bone, but Kate didn't notice. She stood on the embankment, looking at the lights of the city at night, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a surprising clarity of thought. With trembling fingers, she found the number for the Violet Hills office on her phone. The phone rang once, then twice. On the fifth ring, a low male voice said, "Richard Goldman speaking." Kate was taken aback for a moment. She hadn't expected the owner of the chain to answer so late. But she quickly regained her composure and spoke in the tone of a spoiled socialite. "Mr. Goldman, I apologize for calling so late. My name is Elizabeth Stone, and I am a regular customer of your Violet Hills boutique. I have encountered an extremely unpleasant situation, and I would like to discuss it with you personally, rather than with the manager." There was a pause on the line. Then Goldman replied, "Mrs. Stone, normally all questions are handled by the managers of our boutiques." "Mr. Goldman," Kate let her irritation slip into her voice, "I spend 5 figures at your boutique, and right now we're talking about your company's reputation. Believe me, this is not a conversation for the manager." He paused for a few seconds. "All right. Tomorrow at 10 in my office. Would that work for you? I'll give you the address." "Yes, send it to this number," Kate replied in the same confident tone of a spoiled customer. Donald didn't come home that night. In the morning, she stood in front of her closet for a long time, choosing an outfit. She settled on a strict black suit that she wore for meetings with major suppliers. No makeup, just foundation to hide the traces of a sleepless night. She pulled her hair back into a simple bun. Goldman's office was located in the business center, 30 floors of glass and concrete. At the reception desk, Kate gave her name as Elizabeth Stone and was immediately escorted upstairs. A spacious office with panoramic windows, minimalist furniture, and paintings on the walls. Everything spoke of power and money. Richard Goldman turned out to be a tall, gray-haired man in his 60s. He rose from behind his desk and held out his hand. "Mrs. Stone." "Mrs. Kramer," Kate corrected him. "I'm sorry for the deception, Mr. Goldman. I'm not your client. But if I hadn't introduced myself as a dissatisfied customer, you would hardly have agreed to see me." He paused. then nodded toward a chair. "Sit down and explain why you're here." Kate took out her phone. "Because your manager, Tracy Hill, is bringing Chinese fakes into the boutique instead of high-end collections. And she's pocketing the difference." Goldman leaned back in his chair. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof?" "Yes," she said, turning on the recording. Tracy's voice filled the office as she discussed the counterfeit scheme with Donald. Goldman listened silently, his face impassive. When the recording ended, he drummed his fingers on the table. "And you are, excuse me, who?" "I'm the wife of the financial advisor who helps Miss Hill pull off these schemes, and who, by the way, she stole from his family." "I see." Goldman looked at her intently. "So, personal motives?" "Yes." Kate didn't deny it. "But that doesn't change the facts. Yesterday, your manager caused a scene at Olivia's restaurant. She slapped me in front of witnesses. If you check, I think you'll find a lot of interesting things in the boutique's records." He paused. "Leave me a copy of the recording, and give me until tomorrow." "Of course." Kate sent the file to his email. "Check it out. I think you'll find a lot more than what's on this recording." At the door, she turned around. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Goldman." He nodded, keeping his eyes on her. In his eyes, Kate saw something that looked like respect. Outside, she took a deep breath. The first step had been taken. Now all she had to do was wait. Donald came home late that evening. Kate was already in her bedroom, but she could hear him pacing in the kitchen, clearly gathering his courage to talk. Finally, he knocked quietly on her bedroom door. "Kate, we need to talk about what happened at the restaurant." "Not now," she replied calmly, without opening the door. "Let's talk tomorrow." She spent the entire next day watching the news from Violet Hills on the boutique's social media. Tracy posted about the new collection as if nothing had happened, posing in front of the shop windows and chatting with her followers. Her confidence in her own invulnerability was almost admirable. Donald arrived in the evening. He looked rumpled and nervous, constantly adjusting his tie, an old habit that surfaced when he was stressed. Kate calmly poured herself some tea and sat down at the kitchen table. "Listen," he began, sitting down opposite her. "What Tracy did, it was unforgivable. I didn't know she was coming. I didn't think she was capable of that." Kate took a sip of her tea. "Really? What did you think she was capable of when you were telling me on the phone how much you didn't love me?" He flinched. "What are you talking about?" "Never mind," she shrugged. "You know, there's this strange thing called a dash cam in my car. Sometimes it records very interesting conversations." Donald turned pale. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, but said nothing. Kate finished her tea and put the cup in the sink. "You don't have to make excuses. I understand everything. I understand that you haven't loved me for a long time, and I understand that I'm clingy. By the way, are you moving in with her today?" "Kate, it's not that simple." "No, it is simple. I'm filing for divorce. We'll discuss the division of property with the lawyers. Now, excuse me, I'm tired. It's been a long day." He got up, still trying to say something, but she had already gone into the bedroom. A few minutes later, the front door slammed. In the morning, Kate noticed a black Mercedes near Violet Hills. Richard Goldman didn't waste any time checking it out. She deliberately walked past the boutique on her way to work and saw Tracy greeting unexpected guests. Her smile seemed a little more tense than usual. At lunchtime, Martha called to discuss yesterday's dinner at the restaurant. It turned out that the news of the slap had already spread throughout their circle of friends. Kate politely listened to the condolences and sympathetic exclamations, but avoided a detailed discussion. After work, she stopped by the supermarket. Her habit of buying groceries for two was still evident. As she placed her purchases on the conveyor belt, she noticed Tracy out of the corner of her eye, standing in the next line, chatting animatedly on her phone. She probably had no idea what was in store for her. Kate paid slowly and left without even glancing at her rival. In the evening, she received a message from Donald. "I'll be staying with a friend for now. I'll pick up my things on the weekend if that's okay with you." She replied with a short, "Okay," and blocked his number. She couldn't sleep for a long time that night. In the empty apartment, every sound seemed louder than usual. Their wedding photo was on the bedside table. She would have to take it down. The phone was silent. Goldman clearly had no intention of keeping her informed about the investigation. Well, she could wait. The next day, something was clearly going on at the boutique. Through the window, Kate saw people in formal suits bustling between the racks and studying documents. Tracy was rushing between them, her perfect hairstyle disheveled, her smile resembling a grimace. Kate calmly walked past. She had her own store to attend to. By evening, the first rumors of an inspection at the elite boutique appeared in the city's public forums. Some wrote about counterfeit goods, others about financial fraud. Kate read the comments with a slight smile. People loved to gossip about other people's problems. Donald tried to call from a different number. She dismissed the call, but managed to hear the beginning of his message. "What have you done? Tracy is hysterical at the boutique." Kate deleted the message without listening to the rest. Nothing happened over the next 2 days. Goldman didn't call, but Kate didn't expect an immediate response. A man of his stature had to check everything thoroughly. She worked calmly in the store, meeting with suppliers and advising customers. Inside, she felt a strange emptiness, not pain or anger, just quiet anticipation. Tracy looked through the invoices, trying unsuccessfully to concentrate. The letters blurred before her eyes. The third day of the audit was more exhausting than the previous ones. The auditors requested documents for the entire year, down to every single receipt. Her office in the boutique had turned into a makeshift archive. Boxes of papers covered the entire floor, and 2 meticulous financiers methodically checked every number. Goldman himself came to check on the first day. His appearance took her by surprise. Usually, the owner of the chain didn't bother with such trifles. He walked around the boutique, carefully examining the merchandise, asked a few questions about the latest deliveries, and left. An hour later, a team of auditors arrived. At first, she wasn't too worried. The documents were in order and the deliveries had been properly documented. But yesterday, one of the auditors started asking strange questions about Chinese manufacturers. And this morning, he requested the contact details of all suppliers for the last year. Her phone vibrated. A message from Donald. "What's going on? Why are they checking all the contracts?" Tracy threw her phone down in annoyance. He had already texted her 3 times that morning, sounding increasingly panicked. She didn't understand what was going on herself. An unscheduled audit, Goldman's personal interest, the auditor's meticulousness. It didn't add up. One of the auditors cleared his throat delicately. "Miss Hill, we can't find the original contracts with the Milan factory." She smiled stiffly. "I'll look in the archives." As she headed for the filing cabinet, she heard the second auditor say quietly into the phone, "Yes, Mr. Goldman, it looks like you were right about the Italian documents." By lunchtime, the situation had become quite tense. The auditors requested access to bank statements while checking deliveries against customs declarations. Tracy felt cold sweat running down her back. Donald had helped her disguise the Chinese shipments as Italian, but if they dug deep enough. At 3 o'clock, Goldman arrived at the boutique again. This time, he went straight to her office without even glancing at the merchandise. He sat down opposite her and placed a folder on the table. "Miss Hill, could you explain these discrepancies in the documents?" She took the folder with trembling hands. It was a comparison table of deliveries, official contracts, and actual movements of goods. All the discrepancies were neatly highlighted in red. "I can explain," she began, but Goldman interrupted her. I think it's time we talked about how you forged the delivery documents. And where did the difference in cost between the original collections and the Chinese copies go? A cold sweat broke out on her forehead. How did he find out? Who could? A scene from the restaurant suddenly flashed into her mind. Kate Kramer, Donald's quiet, inconspicuous wife, who just sat there and watched Tracy make a scene, who didn't respond to the slap, who just walked away. Goldman was still talking about the audit, the lawyers, the possible criminal case. But Tracy wasn't listening anymore. She remembered how she had bragged to Donald about her scheme with the fake documents, how they had discussed it in his car, in his wife's car. Her hand reached for her phone. She had to warn Donald. But Goldman shook his head. Don't bother. Your financial advisor is already aware of the situation. He's also in for an unpleasant conversation with his firm's management. Tracy stared silently out the window. Behind the glass, she could see the sign of a lingerie store across the street. Intimate Secrets. What a ridiculous name. Almost as ridiculous as her own self-confidence. Like wanting to prove her superiority to a woman who was just waiting for the right moment to strike. Her phone vibrated again. A message from Donald. I've been called to the principal's office. What should we do? Tracy smiled. Nothing now. She turned to Goldman. Should I call my lawyer? Tracy looked at her photo on the boutique's website. It had already been replaced with a dry announcement about a change in management. Her phone was ringing off the hook with calls from journalists and colleagues, but she didn't answer. She sat in a cafe across the street and watched the disaster unfold. It all started with Isabella Reynolds. The night before, she had been at a charity reception wearing a dress from the latest Milan collection, which she had paid $5,000 for. The fabric, which was supposed to shimmer in the spotlight in a special way, looked cheap and lifeless. The club's security guard, a former buyer for a luxury boutique, looked at the outfit suspiciously at the entrance. The label seemed to be right, but something was off. And now Isabella, in her strict, immaculate suit, rushed to the boutique like a bloodhound to demand an explanation. Goldman was already waiting for her at the entrance, impeccable in his gray suit from a real Italian tailor. Tracy grimaced. She knew the price of that impeccability. She herself had spent years building the same image. Catherine Donovan arrived for lunch. Tracy remembered selling her that white suit, describing the special fabric treatment, the indestructible quality, the possibility of casually throwing the jacket on the back seat and arriving at a meeting looking impeccable. I wonder how quickly Catherine realized she'd been duped. Her phone beeped, a message from Donald. I'm being called to the director's office. They already have the Violet Hills documents. What should we do? Tracy smiled. Nothing now. She remembered how he had helped her forge invoices and come up with schemes for making illegal payments. Back then, he was happy with his cut from each forgery. But now... At 3 o'clock, Melissa Grant, a vintage collector, arrived at the boutique. Tracy knew immediately that she was there to discuss the jacket that was supposedly from an old collection from the 1980s. The quality of the stitching gave the fake away. Anyone with even the slightest knowledge of vintage clothing would have noticed. But Melissa wanted so badly to believe she had found the one that she turned a blind eye to the obvious. In the evening, Tracy's work phone rang. It was Goldman. She didn't answer right away, but then decided that things couldn't get any worse. Miss Hill, I'm looking through the returns right now. There have only been 3 cases in the last year. Apparently, the customers were embarrassed to admit they didn't know anything about designer clothes. But now that the truth has come out, I already have 4 claims on my desk, and that's just the beginning. What do you have to say about that? What can you say? She watched as boxes of documents were carried out of the boutique. They got what they wanted, status items at an attractive price. Everyone was happy until they found out the truth. You sold fakes and passed them off as originals. Goldman's voice rang out coldly. I was selling an illusion. They wanted to believe they could afford real luxury. I just gave them that opportunity. At the price of the real thing, he reminded her. At the price of their vanity, Tracy retorted. He paused. We're filing a lawsuit, and we're not the only ones. The lawyers already have 2 clients with claims. I think there will be more. Of course, she finished her cold coffee. Now that it's official that they were deceived, many will want their money back. But they wore these things with pride, bragged about the brands, received compliments. I'm not interested in your excuses, Goldman interrupted her. I'll see you in my office at 10 tomorrow to sign your termination papers. And yes, I advise you to talk to a lawyer. Tracy hung up and looked at her watch. Donald had a meeting with his firm's management at 10. Funny coincidence. I wonder if he'll also make excuses that he was just giving people what they wanted. Or will he blame it all on her? Her phone vibrated again. Another message from Donald. I'm at Kate's, trying to explain everything. Maybe there's still a way to fix this? She deleted the message without reading it. Some things can't be fixed, especially when you meet someone who knows how to wait silently and strike precisely where it hurts. I wonder how long Kate had been planning this blow, from the moment she found the recording on the answering machine, or even earlier when she noticed the first signs of infidelity. In any case, she waited for the perfect moment, and now she was reaping the rewards. Her husband would lose his job, his mistress would be at the center of a scandal, and she herself. And what about her? Tracy suddenly realized that she had no idea how this woman was feeling right now. Was she gloating? Was she gloating? Or was she just moving on, knowing that her revenge had been complete? Donald sat across from Kate, nervously fiddling with his tie. He had been suspended from work pending an investigation, and now he seemed to have no idea what to do with himself. His expensive suit, which always fit perfectly, now seemed foreign and uncomfortable. I met her in March, he began after a long silence. Just a regular business meeting. Tracy was looking for a financial advisor for some tax scheme. Nothing special, just routine optimization. Kate stared silently out the window. March. That was when he had first turned down their traditional weekend getaway. Too much work, an important client. At first, it was strictly professional. Then she invited me to dinner to discuss the details. I should have refused, but he faltered. She was so vibrant, confident. She knew what she wanted. There was something like admiration in his voice, and Kate felt nauseous. All these months she had been thinking about their first meeting, about what they had talked about. Now, listening to him, she realized it had been nothing special, a banal office romance. Then she told me about her scheme with the fake goods. It seemed so adventurous, exciting. I helped her set up the paperwork and figured out how to make the payments. She was thrilled. She said she'd finally met a man who understood her. Kate remembered how he started staying late at work, how the urgent meetings in the evening started, how he stopped talking about his day. She noticed all these little things but chalked them up to fatigue and work stress. We would meet at her apartment or in hotels. Sometimes she would come to the office pretending to be a client. Everything was so... He paused, searching for the right words. Exciting? Kate prompted. Her voice sounded unexpectedly calm. Yes, he lowered his eyes. With her, everything was different. She didn't demand promises. She didn't make plans. She just lived in the moment. And I forgot about everything, about you, about our marriage, about the fact that forgery and fake documents are a criminal offense. Kate listened as he described his affair and felt a strange emptiness inside. No drama, no great love, just a man tired of the predictability of family life, just a woman who offered him thrills. I didn't want to hurt you, he looked up. I didn't. I thought I could keep it together, that you wouldn't find out and everything would just... Just what? Kate interrupted him. Just go away. Or that I'd figure it out myself and save you from having to make a decision. He was silent. Rain began to fall outside the window, drops slowly running down the glass, blurring the outlines of the city. "What now?" she asked. "Now that your bright, confident lover has turned out to be a common con artist? Now that your career is in jeopardy because of her schemes? Now you suddenly remember your wife?" "Kate, I—" He reached across the table, but she pulled away. "You know what's funny?" She finally turned to him. "I really loved you, all these years. Even when I started suspecting you of cheating, I still loved you. I thought maybe it would pass. Maybe you'd come to your senses." Donald slumped in his chair. Now, without his usual self-confidence, he seemed smaller, older. "I can fix this," he muttered. "I'll find a new job. I'll break up with Tracy. We'll start over." Kate shook her head. "No, we won't. Because it's not about Tracy, and it's not about your job. It's about the fact that you betrayed not only me, but yourself. You got involved with a con artist. You forged documents. You lied to my face. And all for what? For a thrill?" He was silent. Outside, the rain grew heavier, drumming on the eaves. "And you know what's worst of all?" Kate stood up and walked over to the window. "The way you behaved in the restaurant. When she insulted me. When she slapped me. You just sat there and watched. You didn't even try to stop her." "I was confused," he said hollowly. "No, you just showed who you really are. A man who always goes with the flow, who is incapable of taking responsibility, who lets others make decisions and then says, 'I didn't mean to hurt you.'" He stood up and walked over to her. "Kate, please, give me a chance to make it right." She looked at his reflection in the glass. Once, this man had seemed perfect to her. Strong, reliable. When did everything change? Or did she just see what she wanted to see? "Go," she said quietly. "Just go. My lawyer will contact you about the divorce." "Kate, go," she repeated without turning around. "And take your things. You can leave anything you need at Tracy's. That is, if she still wants anything to do with you now that you're useless to her." He stood there for a moment, then sighed heavily and left. Kate heard him gathering his things in the bedroom, then the front door slam. Then there was silence, broken only by the sound of rain outside the window. She stood at the window, watching him walk to his car, hunched over, without an umbrella in the pouring rain. 12 years of marriage ended like this, to the sound of rain and with a bitter taste in her mouth. The phone on the table vibrated, a message from Tracy's lawyer demanding that she delete the recording of their conversation. Kate smiled. Too late. It was already done. The lawyer explained the divorce proceedings while Kate looked around his office, unassuming, businesslike, with diplomas on the walls and neat folders on the shelves. James Harris specialized in divorce proceedings and, after listening to her story, assured her that the case would not be complicated. They had no children together, each had their own business, and the apartment was registered as Kate's premarital property. The entire process took just a few meetings and a stack of documents. Kate methodically filled out the papers, trying not to think about how strange their life together looked when laid out in columns and paragraphs. 12 years of marriage were reduced to dry phrases. Divorce by mutual consent, division of property, no claims against each other. Donald had taken his things while she was out. She had deliberately left the house for the whole day, leaving the keys with the concierge. When she returned, she found empty shelves in the closet, small items missing from the nightstand, and empty hangers in the dressing room. He hadn't left a note, and rightly so. What could he say? Strangely, his absence felt like a presence. Every empty shelf, every unoccupied corner seemed to scream that the man who had shared her life for the past 12 years was no longer there. Kate made some tea and sat down in an armchair looking around the apartment, which had suddenly become too big for one person. First thing in the morning, she took off her wedding ring. It was loose on her thinner finger anyway, and put it in a box. Then she gathered all their photos and put them in a box. She didn't throw them away. She just put them out of sight. Maybe someday she'd be able to look at them without feeling so hurt, or maybe not. Work at the store went on as usual. Kate immersed herself in her work. She updated the inventory, ordered repairs for the fitting rooms, and hired another sales assistant. The numbers in the accounting reports were reassuring in their certainty. No emotions, just a clear balance of income and expenses. The evenings were harder. They used to be their time, dinner together, talking about the day, watching a movie. Now Kate was learning to live in silence. She turned on music, read, played solitaire on her tablet. Sometimes she just sat by the window looking at the city lights. News about Tracy and Donald reached her through indirect channels. Her husband's former lover tried to contest her dismissal, but to no avail. The evidence of her machinations was irrefutable. Donald found a job at a small company with a significant demotion. No one wanted to hire a financier with a tarnished reputation. Martha tried to support her by inviting her to dinners and parties, but Kate refused. She wasn't ready to face curious glances and sympathetic questions. And what was there to talk about? It was a common story. Her husband had left her for another woman. It was so banal it made her teeth grind. On weekends, she busied herself with redecorating her apartment. She repainted the walls in her bedroom, changed the curtains, and bought a new sofa. She donated the old one, which she had chosen with Donald, to a charity. Little by little, the space around her began to change. It became her space, with no traces of their shared past. One evening, her mother called. She asked how she was doing and offered to come over. Kate refused. She had to go through this on her own. Besides, work really helped. When you're picking out lingerie for a client or discussing terms with suppliers, there's no time to feel sorry for yourself. Weeks passed. Little by little, her habits changed. Kate started buying different groceries, cooking the things she liked instead of what Donald liked. She stopped checking her phone every 5 minutes. She learned to fall asleep in an empty bed. Life wasn't exactly back to normal. It was just different. The lawyer gave her the date of the first hearing. Kate nodded indifferently and marked it on her calendar. One more meeting, one more signature, and it would all be over. Officially, legally, permanently. However, for her, it had all ended back then, in the restaurant, when her husband silently watched his mistress slap his wife. A bride came into the store to choose lingerie for her wedding night. She was excited, happy, confident in eternal love. Kate helped her choose, smiled, gave advice. And then she stood at the window for a long time, watching the girl hurry away. I wonder if she looked as happy as that 12 years ago. Probably. Donald sent a message. Something about documents she had left behind. Kate forwarded the message to her lawyer to sort out. She wasn't ready to talk to him, either in person or on the phone. The memories of his confession were still too fresh, of how easily he had betrayed their marriage for the sake of thrills. When she left the house, she sometimes caught sympathetic glances from her neighbors. Everyone already knew the story, about the affair and the scandal with the forgeries. In a small neighborhood, news travels fast. But Kate didn't care. Let them gossip, let them pity her, let them gloat. It didn't affect her anymore. One morning she caught herself humming for the first time in a long time as she was arranging merchandise in the store. She froze, listened to herself, and realized that the pain hadn't gone away. It had just become quieter, like the sound of rain outside the window. It's there, but it doesn't interfere with life anymore. Maybe that's what healing is all about. Not forgetting, but learning to live on.